if my mission is, hey, Dr. Sanchez, you're supposed to develop a leader of character who's going to go out and make a positive difference in the community in which they live, work, and serve, what do you think is most important?
Hello and welcome to Love as a Business Strategy, a podcast that brings humanity to the workplace. We're here to talk about business, but we want to tackle topics that most business leaders shy away from. And we believe that humanity and love should be at the center of every successful business. I'm your host, Jeff Ma, and I'm here as always to listen and talk to people about real businesses, real stories, real humanity and love at the center of successful business. My guest today is Dr. John Sanchez, a clinical assistant professor at Texas A&M's Mays Business School and a proud recipient of the 2025 Mays Business School Teaching Excellence Award. With a background in high-end luxury retail and wholesale, John brings real-world business experience into the classroom, blending it with a unique human-centered teaching approach. He's here to share how he's helping graduate students understand and apply love as a business strategy, and how that combination of practical expertise and people-first leadership is shaping tomorrow's business leaders. John, thank you so much for being on the show. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me. That was fantastic.
Yeah, and we met yesterday, and I go, want to be on the podcast? And you said,
absolutely.
Sure. So here you are. But it's because we had such an incredible conversation. I wanted to bring that in today. But before we begin, one question to kick me off and the audience off here is, what is your passion and how did you find it?
It's funny you said it actually in the intro when you talked about me as a higher education professor and my approach to my students, honestly, my approach to everything I plan, everything I prepare, everything I deliver for them. And I know it's in your vernacular, and people know that from you and the team at Softway, that everything is actually done and stems from love. That's where my passion is. So at Mays Business School at Texas A&M University, our mission, right, is to develop leaders of character who will make a positive difference in the communities in which they live, work, and serve. If that's the case, how on earth am I supposed to do that? And that's the question at the forefront of my mind every time I plan something. How can I be goodness to them? How can I love them to a place where I'm preparing them to be a leader of character? I'm preparing them to make an incredible impact in the communities where they live, work, and serve. That's the passion. That's why I love what I do. That part I would probably do for free. They pay me to go to faculty meetings and to do all the other stuff. But as far as the planning, preparing, and actually getting in front of the students and doing that, as you phrased it, the passionate way, I would do that part for free.
One of the really interesting parts of our conversation yesterday was this idea of how you bring business, like true business experience and business understanding into these business graduate school classrooms where they're learning about how to go do business. And to me, I was like, oh, that makes perfect sense. But what I learned from you is that might not be very common. And I was hoping you could talk a little bit about that.
In higher education, no. So I always joke, but I don't, I'm serious, but I always joke and I tell people I used to work for a living before I became a professor. And some people get it and some don't. Ultimately, what I mean is I spent a good portion of my life, over half my life actually, in the business world, in industry. And I know that when I went back to school at a late age to get my MBA and then again to go get my doctorate, having that real world experience and having experience in the business world allowed me to immediately make every subject relatable when I was studying it. It was a huge advantage for me in grad school, MBA and doctoral, same thing. When I pursued my doctoral program, I was encouraged by my professors to do it for a lot of reasons. One that stuck out was, John, you have so much real world experience that you're going to bring things into the classroom that most professors cannot. That kind of took me by surprise. What do you mean? It was expressed to me before I even entered my doctoral program by other professors, mind you, that a lot of them do not have real world experience. A lot of them have not worked for a living. And now that sounds maybe a little bit callous, but what they mean is they don't have the experience in industry to back up or to support or to relate to what it is they're delivering in their classrooms. A lot of them will get their bachelor degree, they may get their master's, they may not, but they'll go get their PhD and then they start quote unquote teaching. I'm a firm believer that anybody can teach. However, it's got to be something that you're absolutely passionate about. If you put a person in front of a room of people and they're passionate about whatever the topic is, I'm a firm believer that with enough practice, they can do a phenomenal job of relaying and teaching others. In other words, really facilitating their education on that particular subject. I'm not about to stand up in front of anybody and talk about anything that I don't know. And you and I talked about this yesterday. How do you actually know anything? And you answered spot on, which most people don't answer on the first try. It's through experience. I don't know anything unless I've actually experienced it. So I'm not about to get up in front of any of my courses or classes or students and talk about any subject or topic that I don't feel incredibly knowledgeable about, only because I've experienced it. I'm not merely going to stand up and recite or regurgitate something that I've read or something that I've researched. It's got to be relevant. It's got to be real world. It's got to be rigorous. I have to have experienced it. And that has definitely enriched what I do. It's really the only way I can do what I do. But I found a lot of my colleagues granted, this is the 5th school that I've taught in, Texas A&M University, but a lot of colleagues do not have real world work experience. I noticed it, but over the last couple of years, so many of my students have pointed it out to me. And they're blunt. They'll ask poignant questions. Obviously, once we establish rapport and build relationship in my classroom, which happens very quickly, the students become very vulnerable, especially with their questions. They're candid, and they appreciate that. I mean, they can smell BS a mile away, not just in me, but anyone. And this goes with all their other professors. So over the last couple of years, actually, it's my students primarily that have brought this to my attention. And they'll say things like, Dr. Sanchez, we were having a conversation in this class and this topic came up and we started asking questions. And all of a sudden the professor shut it down. And we felt like we were just getting going. And it was almost as if they didn't know an answer, or it was almost as if they were intimidated, or it was almost as if they just didn't know. I said, well, you're actually right on all 3 counts. Nothing wrong with that, as long as you implement a little bit of humility in there. Like, I don't know everything. I'll be the first to admit I don't know everything. There's always room for improvement. Regardless of how long I've been doing anything, regardless of how much experience I have in any field, there's always more to learn. There's always room for improvement. But they kept pointing this out over and over and over. And so with that, a lot of them were asking about my professional background because I was very hesitant to share it for the first couple of years that I taught. I just thought it would be bragging or boasting, talking about things I've done or where I've worked or accolades or whatever. So to remain modest and humble, I just didn't share. They started asking for real world examples. If we talked about a topic, Dr. Sanchez, can you give us an example? Absolutely. And I'd have a couple to give them, regardless of the topic. That really piqued their interest. And then throughout the class, and certainly at the end of the class, I started to get comments from students. Why do you not share this more? Well, it was really just coming from a modesty or a humility standpoint. And they said, we actually feel like you're robbing us. We feel like you're not giving us everything you could because you're not sharing your real world experiences. So that, coupled with the fact that I see and hear the background of my colleagues, I realize there's a big gap between what the students get with someone who has had real world experience and can speak to that and someone who hasn't. Mm-hmm. It's theory and frameworks versus practicum. And they need both, but ultimately, if my mission is, hey, Dr. Sanchez, you're supposed to develop a leader of character who's going to go out and make a positive difference in the community in which they live, work, and serve. What do you think is most important? what's going to help them most, what's going to set them up for success.
Yeah. I love that. And you know what? It's dawning on me why I connect so strongly with you is because your kind of approach and story behind, everything you just said about how you teach and how you incorporate that experience into the stories and into the lessons is exactly kind of my philosophy, our philosophy when it comes to,
It is.
love as a business strategy. Like we went out to write a book that wasn't about academia, wasn't about the X's and O's, but also just telling the story, the experience of what happened. I think experience often is the best teacher, whether it's, of course, experiencing yourself, but even when you're learning through others, hearing their stories and hearing about their experiences helps us immensely. And I think that's amazing that students get that opportunity with you.
That's the reason why everyone that I've ever met that has heard about Softway or heard about Culture Rise or heard about the book, they're absolutely attracted to it, regardless of age, regardless of background, regardless of arena in which they work. My students, it was one of my students that actually led me to your book in the first place. And I know that they've attended, your workshop as well. And that's the exact reason why people are so attracted, why they love the book. And I know they're going to love the second one, why they devour it, why they spread the word about it, and why they immediately see it relatable and applicable. That's what people want. It's not a quick fix. It's just, let me show you how to think about those things that you're going through. That's why people love you guys. That's why they love the book, because it's immediately relatable. It's actionable. It's immediately applicable, and it's real. They've heard the stuff before. They've never heard it put together like you have. They've never seen or heard the level or the degree of vulnerability, certainly in a business realm, like we talked about yesterday. You and I and most people in business, we've all kind of received our training from the same places. Our upbringing, society, academics, and now the business world has trained us on how to think about things. Then all of a sudden, you, Frank, and Muhammad and Chris come along and you mess that up because you're candid and real and you talk about things in an incredibly vulnerable way, which sparks the same thing in other people. They love that. They want that. They desire that. And then when they get into it, they absolutely relish it. And they're thinking to themselves, where's this been all my life? And I wish it wasn't true. I mean, I like this, what I'm about to tell you, and I like it and I enjoy it, but I wish it wasn't true. My students actually feel the same way. They come to me and they tell me, Dr. Sanchez, that's the best class I've ever had. Or they write me notes, handwritten notes, or they send emails, or they send texts. Because yes, I give all my students my phone number, which a lot of people thought that's stupid, that's risky, but they love it and they use it and they appreciate it. But when I hear things like, Dr. Sanchez, that's the best class I've ever had, I like that. I like hearing that, but at the same time, it makes me sad because I have mostly graduate students. That means they've been in school at least 3, mostly 4, sometimes 5 years. And I think to myself and I say to them, oh my gosh, if that was the best class you've ever had, what have you been doing up until this point? What have your classes been like? Yeah. And so, but that's why students walk away at least having been impacted. And that's why your readers and your listeners feel the same thing. It's the exact same reason.
I appreciate the kudos. And it's helping me really realize in this moment that, education parallels the real world, right? Like if we're leaving schools to go out and do these types of jobs, then yeah, school's meant to prepare us for those types of jobs. Supposed to, yeah. But, obviously love as a business strategy and everything we talk about is trying to create a new way of thinking and revolution around how work is supposed to happen. And so I think it's really important that the education that parallels it also starts changing, which is what you're doing, which is like where it needs to start here, because otherwise everyone's still leaving or entering school and leaving school kind of tainted with kind of this
Yeah.
other version of business, this other
Yeah.
version of what they assume good leaders and what power looks like and what winning looks like out in the
Exactly.
business world, right? Like they've been taught this indirectly. And that's where I think more professors, but just educators in general, and I would say even further back than higher education, right?
Sure.
We should be starting to have different conversations, maybe. Because I guess my question for you is, what are we preparing kids for? I would love your opinion on, like, I'll use kids loosely, but what are we
Sure.
preparing youth and the upcoming generation for? What's the most important thing for you for them to leave your classes with, or what into the real world? Like, what do you think our job is to equip them with?
So I actually really love our new mission at the business school, preparing leaders of character. And what are we preparing them for? Well, we want them to go and make a positive difference in the communities where they work. We want them to make a positive difference in the communities where they live and certainly where they serve. I love our mission, I really do. But because of that, I'm constantly asking myself, like I said earlier, at the forefront of my mind is, well, what am I doing then in my role? The way I speak to them, the way I set up the class, how we hold class. So, like you said, and I tell them, I ask them, how old are you? 23. So you've been trained one way for 23 years. You said it yesterday when we were together yesterday. They come to you tainted because they've had this training for 23 years. Then all of a sudden they come into my class. I only have 16 weeks with them, which is not very long. In the 16 weeks, I see them twice a week for an hour and a half each time. That's nothing. So I'm combating their 23 years of training with a certain number of hours that I have exposed to them. So I take my job very seriously. And you asked, what is it that you're preparing them for? Well, I'm preparing them to win every day. I told you yesterday, I asked them the same questions, everybody the same question on day one. Who likes to win? Everybody's hand goes up. Second question, who wants to make sure that when you leave here and you start your job, your work matters? Your work is significant and your work makes a difference. Undoubtedly, every hand goes up. If that's true, if what you told me is true, that you like to win, and that when you go to work, you want to make sure that your work matters, is significant, and makes a difference, then that's my responsibility. How do I get you to a place where no matter what happens day to day in business, which is wrought with business problems, difficult circumstances, difficult people, how do I get you to the place to ensure that you can win every day? Whether that which is in front of you is good or bad or ugly. And then secondly, how do I get you to a place where when you leave my classroom at the end of the term, you can walk out knowing confidently that when you go to work, it's going to matter, it's going to be significant, and it's going to make a difference. So my approach to everything, particularly in what we talk about, right? So this is the first term in my strategy classes that I will make love as a business strategy required reading. It's a huge component of my courses moving forward, because the truths, the vulnerability that you share, the truths that you share about a real company and your journeys, they need to be exposed to that. And so it's not just Dr. Sanchez always talking about it. Now we have other people that can share some fantastic examples of real life, real world things that are ultimately going to set you up for success. That's my job. How can I set you up for success? I don't know where you're going to work in the future. I don't know where you're going. I don't know what arena or what industry or what field you'll be in, but how can I make sure that I set you up for success? And it all comes down to your thinking. How do you think about things? You guys do a fantastic job of that. You expose truth behind business acumen, behind business vernacular that we're all used to, situations that most of us, if we haven't been in before, we're going to be in it. And you expose your failures, you expose what you did to remedy that, and you expose the incredible benefit from doing the right thing. And as you guys put it, through love. And so that's why it's required reading for my classes moving forward, because they need that, and they need it from another voice, just aside from my own all the time. I mean, I know they appreciate me, but I can't be the only one telling them this. And your book just continues to reinforce that, which I'm trying to do, which is set them up for success. Everything we talk about is good news. The bad stuff, it's still good news, right? And I'm like you. I mean, you voiced yesterday. It came up probably 4 different times when the day that we spent yesterday together, about your heart is, I don't want anybody to sneak by. I don't want anybody to get lost. I want to make sure everybody's reached, right? That's this project we're working on. You just kept saying it over and over and over. Yeah, but I don't want anybody to get by. I don't want to miss out. I don't want anybody to miss out. And that's my approach as well with my students, right? I know I'm not everybody's cup of tea, but at the same time, every day that I go into class, right before I go into class, I'm constantly thinking, how can I be goodness to them? Regardless of where they're at, regardless of what they're doing, regardless of what industry they're going to. And I know I don't think like everyone else. I just don't care, right? The way I think dictates how I make decisions, how I treat my students, and what I do to plan and prepare. Obviously, it's having some kind of positive impact, right? It was such an honor to win that award this year for the Teaching Excellence Award. I didn't expect it. It was such an honor. It was only my 3rd year here at Texas A&M, and I found out that you had to be voted by the students to win the award. And then the office that took these votes and nominations, they don't have to do this, but they totally blew me away, because they actually emailed me some of the comments that students had given, and it was very humbling, to say the least. It was great.
Well, from what I know of you, well deserved. And, you know, as we wrap up here, I know we haven't had enough time to dive into all the nuances of kind of our discussions around higher education, love as a business strategy, and how they connect. But I'm so glad and grateful that you had this chance to come and share it on the podcast, because your story, your approach, I think, is absolutely critical to the mission, my mission really, of bringing humanity back to the workplace, because we can't just do it up at the current C levels. We can't just do it with the leaders of today. We have to do it with the leaders of tomorrow, with the kids of today. And you're doing that work. And I don't think there's enough attention there. And just hearing how you've been passionate about that, driving that forward, really motivates me. And I appreciate you coming today and sharing those stories and all that.
Absolutely. It was my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And to the audience, thank you so much for tuning in. As always, we're here posting episodes every 2 weeks. And if you appreciate it and like it, send us a shout out, but also give us a rating, 5 stars, all that good stuff. Check out the book, Love as a Business Strategy, and coming soon, Love as a Change Strategy, Amazon, other retailers as well. Subscribe if you haven't. But with that, we'll see you all in 2 weeks. Appreciate Dr. John Sanchez for joining us, and we'll be signing off.
Awesome. Thank you.